Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for tonight's talk on the Opalised Dinosaurs of Lightning Ridge. This talk we are putting on especially for the Australian Heritage Festival, which this year has the theme of Unearthed. I have spoken a few times this week and last week at the Australian Heritage Festival, talking with other paleontologists such as Adele Pentland and Jake Katevsky. But tonight we've thrown them out. We're sick of talking to them. So I have gotten in the incredible Jenni Brammall, who is working and has worked at the Australian Opal Centre for many, many years, to take us through some of the incredible fossils and dinosaurs we find up north in Lightning Ridge. Before we start, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we are all meeting on from all different parts of the country. I am on Wallumattagal country here in Sydney, and we are very lucky as paleontologists and miners and people who work in the environment, that we get to look after this incredible landscape and go looking for some of the things buried underneath it as well. Many of the sites that we work on across the country are preserved to this day because of First Nations care and from this connection to country. So we'd like to acknowledge that going forth. Just a few little housekeeping things for this meeting. You will probably notice that your videos are turned off and so are your microphones. This session is being recorded, so this is just to make sure that we have a streamlined recording at the end, and it will be available on the Found a Fossil YouTube afterwards. Now, if you are wondering what on earth Found a Fossil is and who I am Sally Hurst. I am a paleontologist with Macquarie University in Sydney. I am the creator of the Found a Fossil project, which provides guidelines on what to do if you actually find a fossil anywhere in Australia, because it does vary depending on where you are. I'm an educator at the Australian Museum, and I also run my own business, going to schools, talking on TV, and pretty much talking about as many fossils as I can to as many people as will listen, i.e. tonight. I'm also something called a superstar of STEM, and this is a program run by Science and Technology Australia, which aims to break the assumption that science is just for old white men in lab coats. And we are proving that scientists can look very, very different by providing a cohort of an exceptional body of women and non-binary people who are scientists from all across Australia. And Jenni, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Hi, thanks, Sally. I'm joining you from beautiful Uralari country here at Lightning Ridge, and I would like to acknowledge the custodians of this land. Hi, everyone. I am the Head of Collections, Programs and Research at the Australian Opal Centre. I've been involved here for quite a while. I actually came to Lightning Ridge in the early 1990s as a postgraduate student searching for mammal fossils from the age of dinosaurs, and fell in love with the place immediately and came here for a 4-week gig as the guest editor of the Lightning Ridge News in mid-1998. And that 4 years has now turned, 4 months has turned into 4 weeks, has turned into 27 years so far. So yes, I'm very fortunate to have spent a lot of time over those years working with opal miners and other people who are passionate about opal and fossils, to build a nationally significant collection here at Lightning Ridge.
And that is exactly what we are here to talk about tonight. So for the people who are unfamiliar with Lightning Ridge, it's in the middle of bloody nowhere. It's about 8.5 hour drive from Sydney to the northwest. You'll go through towns like Moree, or maybe Nyngan, depending which way you go. And it's a little bit like the Wild West. It's an incredible place to go and visit. I would highly recommend you do. This is one of the signs that you might see when you're out at, I think it's out at the Grawin opal fields. And so there's all these little pockets and small towns, and some of them are kind of leases on wider farming stations or properties. And so because it's technically private property, you don't always need seatbelts or to have your cars registered or to have cars with brakes in this regard. It's also a gorgeous place. It's quite dry and shrubland like, but it can get these monumental storms and flooding if the river gets up. And you will have emus and all sorts of things and incredible people running around as well. You can talk to anyone in Lightning Ridge and they will have some stories to tell. And it's these incredible people, these miners, who we often rely on to talk about the finds that they may have discovered. Because a lot of the time it's not scientists who are making these discoveries, it's these local people. So without them, we would have a very sparse fossil record in Australia indeed, especially when it comes to dinosaurs. About 70% of all the dinosaur species discovered in Australia were not discovered by scientists. They were found by miners, farmers, bushwalkers, and yeah, just people in the community. So, Jenni, I'm going to hand over to you now. Can you talk us through what it's actually like to be down in the mines and how we actually get the opal or opalized fossils out of the ground?
Oh, sure. So the slides we're looking at now show views inside a typical opal mine. So the opal miners mostly work underground with shaft and tunnel mining. There is some open cut mining where people dig down from the surface directly to the potentially opal bearing sediments, but mostly people dig a vertical shaft, which you can see on the left. It's usually about 1 metre in diameter, and they go to work by climbing down a ladder. All of the machinery that they use goes down that shaft, and everything that leaves the mine goes up that shaft. Um, as Sally said, most of the fossils at Lightning Ridge and in the surrounding areas, as well as in the opal fields elsewhere in Australia, are found not by scientists but by miners. This is Sebastian, who's actually the president of our Miners Association, and he's using a hydraulic digger. Some miners use jackhammers, some miners still use picks, hand picks, but Sebastian's using a hydraulic digger, which is powered from above the ground, and he's using joysticks, if you like, to scrape away at what was once sediment within a river that was in a big coastal floodplain running out towards an inland sea around 96 to 100 million years ago. So all of what we call opal dirt, which is the ground that potentially contains the opal that the miners are looking for, is actually ancient paleochannel fill. Um, in most of the mining areas, the miners dig dirt underneath. They use one of a number of ways to remove the dirt from underground and transport it up that vertical shaft. And in most cases, they then do what they call washing it, which means putting it into a modified cement mixer barrel, like you can see on the screen, which is called an agitator. It's a big rocker or churner or tumbler that rotates. There's water in the barrel with the opal dirt, and it gradually wears away and leaves hard tailings. And it's those tailings that the miners search in the hope of finding opal or opalized fossils. Sometimes we're lucky enough to get hold of some potentially opal bearing material from miners who have kindly donated it to an organisation like the Australian Opal Centre, and we can actually sieve it and wash it, look through it. There's different ways that we actually process it. But in essence, the whole of the scientific enterprise searching for and finding fossils in the opal fields is a partnership between miners, opal collectors, and scientists. One of the really wonderful things we do is once a year we spend a couple of 6-week sessions running what we call our Lightning Ridge Fossil Dig. This is a photo taken at our dig. And what these people are doing is a little different from the typical fossil dig or paleo dig. They're actually sitting at tables sorting through tailings from mines. And by having groups of people who spend time with us, we teach them what to look for. We teach them the difference between fossils and non-fossils. And they get their eye in, and by spending many hours doing that really painstaking work, they can make an incredible contribution. We've been running these digs since 2014. We were terrified that nobody would find anything, but somehow every year we do. And that's thanks to the generosity of the miners who understand that once they've sorted through their material, what they've missed is gone, and they're just as happy for us to have an opportunity to find something of value. These are examples of some really beautiful opalized fossils. We can talk a bit later, Sally, if we have time, about how they form and what makes an opalized fossil an opalized fossil. But pretty much, instead of the fossils being preserved in other minerals, they're actually preserved in opal, which is a precious gemstone. So on this screen are a number of fossils ranging from a gorgeous little glowing orange gold pine cone through dinosaur bones, lungfish tooth plates, crocodile teeth, what we call yabby buttons. We can talk about them later, and some of the little freshwater mollusks. So these are beautiful little things that have come out of mining processes. So just a little bit about the world as it was around 100 million years ago. So we have dated the fossil deposits here at about 96 to 100 million years ago. The dates that are most reliable are based on zircon crystals that are from decomposed volcanic ash that's found in some of the opal mines. But on the right, we've got a fairly typical view of Lightning Ridge today. It is a semi-arid environment at the moment because of the extraordinary rain we've had. It's almost jungle-like, but this is more typical. What you can see on the surface there is this pinkish white material. That's actually the Cretaceous dirt that's been brought up from underground and left on the surface. And then on the left is an artist's reconstruction of Lightning Ridge 100 million years ago, when it was a coastal floodplain, heavily forested, with rivers running through, running west and out to the Eromanga Sea.
So I'll chat about these ones. So these are
Yep.
a few examples of fossils that you might be able to see in the Australian Opal Centre showroom that they have. And they are really gorgeous examples. You can see the amazing rainbow colors. They come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes as well. But for a really long time, some of the most amazing specimens, like this one, were carted off to places like the Australian Museum. So I'm pretty sure this is a bone from a plesiosaur, so one of these marine reptiles that was around in the Cretaceous. It's gorgeous. It's got a lot of opal in it, but it's actually kept in the vault of the Australian Museum. It's not actually on display. They do have some amazing ones on display, but I think one of the greatest parts of the Australian Opal Centre is that it's keeping a lot of these finds local. A lot of the miners may never travel to Sydney to see some of these big displays. And so it's really nice to have these finds close to home where the people found them. And instead, we can go and travel to the incredible environment of Lightning Ridge to go and see them. Now, what you've probably all been waiting for is specifically the dinosaurs of Lightning Ridge. So, Australia has about 30 different species of dinosaur. Three of the sort of most well-known ones do actually come from Lightning Ridge. So Jenni's going to talk us through what those three are.
First of all, we have Lightning Claw. Lightning Claw is a massive megaraptorid dinosaur, so one of the theropod dinosaurs. Lightning Claw is yet to be given a scientific name. So it was given a scientific name that didn't quite pass muster. I'm hoping that phone doesn't ring again. But Lightning Claw was a massive megaraptorid, not unlike the megaraptorids found in Victoria and in Queensland. So it's part of an incredible radiation of these dinosaurs in Australia. It's known here mostly from this bone. This bone is a third metatarsus. So it's a foot bone. And there are a number of other elements, including a huge claw from the forefoot of Lightning Claw. And these were donated to us by Rob and Debbie Brogan. So nearly all of the fossils in our collection have been donated by opal miners or others. People on our fossil digs are starting to make a really important contribution too, but we always like to recognise the people who've had the foresight and the generosity to donate these things to us. So there's Lightning Claw. This is a scale model of lightning claw in the Natural History Museum at the University of New England in Armidale with Dr. Phil Bell, who described it. So that's pretty sensational for us to see that. That was a 3D printed model. Hoping we can get one of those at Lightning Ridge.
Phil is also quite small. So if you're thinking like, ah, yes, average human for scale, just scale it down a tiny little bit.
Yeah, and the dinosaur has been scaled down a bit too. Next, we'll talk about Weewarrasaurus pobeni, which was published in 2018. It's a smallish ornithopod dinosaur, so one of the herbivores. And the specimens for these were donated by two people. This is a beautiful reconstruction of Weewarrasaurus by James Couther. So Phil Bell describes this as a kelpie-sized dinosaur, so it was quite small. This is the fellow who Weewarrasaurus was named for, Mike Poben. Mike is actually an opal buyer and seller from South Australia who visits Lightning Ridge regularly and has been passionately interested in fossils for as long as he's been involved with the opal industry. Mike actually had a parcel of rough opal that was brought to him. He sorted through it and pulled out a couple of bits that were of interest, including the piece on the right. So that is the holotype of Weewarrasaurus pobeni in the picture. And it's got extremely distinctive fan-like ornithopod teeth with these sort of uh, fan-like structures on them. Now, Mike had seen a photograph of a similar and related dinosaur in a book, and a little bit of that was exposed, and he pulled it out and he sent the rest of the parcel of opal off with an agent to try and sell it. It came back several days later, and the agent said, "Sorry, Mike, can't move this. Nobody's interested." And he went through it and found the second piece that's part of the same jaw. So there's some fantastic actual footage of Mike talking about this in different settings and podcasts, but he describes it as just the most unlikely thing ever. Now, this is actually another piece of Weewarrasaurus, and it's got a fantastic story too. This little piece was donated to the Australian Opal Centre by a couple named Graham and Christine Thompson, who mined this in the 1970s. And it came in a bag of mussel shells or bivalves. And Elizabeth Smith, Lightning Ridge's preeminent paleontologist, immediately recognised that this was a little piece of Hypsilophodonted-like dinosaur jaw. But there wasn't enough of it there for us to describe anything from it. It just sat in the collection for some years. Here's some photos of Graham and Christine at work in the mid 1970s, and that's the claim that that second little piece came from. And then if we go to the next slide, when we micro CT'd that little piece, we were able to see these wonderful, crisply preserved teeth inside the jaw. And having the more complete holotype material, we were able to allocate this little specimen to Weewarrasaurus also. Weewarrasaurus is a name taken from the opal field that Weewarrasaurus was found at, the holotype, but it's also derived from the local Yuroi language, and it means standing fire. So it's a beautiful name that actually has a meaning because of the fire in opal that is almost a coincidence, but it's lovely to have the local language recorded with permission in some of our species names. So that's Weewarrasaurus. Then we have a larger ornithopod, iguanodontian type dinosaur named Fostoria dimbangunmal, published in 2019. Fostoria is a much larger version, maybe a cow-sized version of the ornithopod radiation from here. The ornithopod material is reasonably common as dinosaurs go here, although they're all extremely rare. So if we go on to the next one, this was actually found in the mid 1980s by Bob Foster. That's Bob underground, and that is some of the holotype material underground back in the 80s. Bob actually was pulling out bones like you wouldn't believe. And again, there's some terrific recordings of Bob talking on ABC radio and just very laconically describing how he would break them up for their opal content. And we hear these stories all the time and we just cry in our soup. And the miners do as well. They sort of come and confess sometimes about the things that they did before they really appreciated how amazing it was what they were finding. Here are some photos of the huge array of bones that are available for Fostoria, part of the holotype material. And these are photos taken by Bob while the material was on loan with the Australian Museum back in the late 1980s. That's Bob and Jenni now. Jenni's Bob's wife, and that's in our little showroom where I'm sitting to talk with you tonight. What's in the showcase underneath is actually the block that we had in the photograph underground, and there's a lovely 3D print there of one of the caudal vertebrae of Fostoria. This is Phil Bell, Dr. Phil Bell, a few years ago when he first came back to Australia from working in Canada and got his position at the University of New England, came and looked at the material in the collection here at the Australian Opal Centre and knew that there were a few years of descriptive work to do. This is Phil making moulds of Fostoria material quite some years ago. I think in the next photo you can see the new improved more more casual Phil of more recent times. And this is Phil at work at the University of New England with some of the 3D prints of this material. That's a photograph. I think that's one of Sally's photographs actually of that caudal vertebra that we saw the print of on display here in the showroom.
Yeah, so I think it's also quite special that so for holotypes, these are usually the first bones of a species found, and we use those bones to describe the species. So then if we ever find any more in future, we have to compare them to the holotype to go, yes, we think this is part of this dinosaur or animal, or no, it's very different. In places like the Australian Museum in Sydney, they have their sort of it's in the basement, their collection essentially, with these amazing compactuses of all these different holotypes under lock and key. And you don't really ever get to see them unless you work at the museum, which I'm lucky enough to do. So occasionally I get to duck in there and see some of the cool things. But again, I think the Australian Opal Centre is so cool that the holotype is right here. It's right there in the showroom for you to go and see. So this was the photo that I took when I went up there the first time, and I was just blown away by how beautiful this is, and that it's right there for you to go and see.
One of the wonderful things about that was because Bob found it underground and finally realised that he had something really significant, he went to the Australian Museum. Alex Ritchie, some of the people online might know Alex by personal reputation. Alex was then at the Australian Museum, and he had this fella who brought in a duffel bag full of stuff that he claimed was dinosaur bones. It took Bob a while to talk his way up into Alex's office, and when Alex saw what he had, he was completely blown away. Two of the major specimens that form part of the Fostoria holotype are blocks with the bones still sitting as they were when they were preserved and converted to opal. Um, Originally, or years ago, when Bob initially lent this material to us, we wanted to prepare it. We just wanted to get in there and get those bones out and look at it. And he said, no, we never get to see this stuff like this. Please don't do that. And we kept the blocks intact. And it was just terrific that a few years later, technology caught up. We were able to put them through a medical CT scanner in Armidale, and we have 3D models. The other block actually has a piece of skull material in it, which is being studied at the moment, and that's a bit of a holy grail material, the skull and dental material. So this is just a fake coloured view of that block that was underground, showing the bones that have been carefully isolated digitally and sort of digitally prepared and printed so that we were able to keep the original to share with people.
And was it this dinosaur that was actually based off multiple individuals?
Yeah, that's right. So it's a Butte story as well. Everyone assumed that it was a single individual. And when Phil and his colleagues actually started to look at it in detail, they realized that there were four shoulder blade bones, three of them from one side of the body. So clearly at least three individuals. And in fact, those three were slightly different sizes. So we had at least three individuals. So this led to all of these wonderful online articles about a herd of dinosaurs being discovered underground and, a family of jewel encrusted dinosaurs discovered in the Australian outback and so on. Yes.
I think it's pretty special as well because there are a number of Australian dinosaurs which have been named based off one piddly little bone. There are some in the audience who know exactly which ones I'm talking about, but we've come a little further now that sometimes we try and either wait for a few more bones or we wait for it to be a good enough specimen that we can definitively say it is a separate species to the ones that we've got. So this is, yeah, definitely a holy grail that we've got so many bones from multiple individuals as well.
Mm. This is a lovely discovery. It's a very modest little piece. It's a single piece of bone. Um, but this was a discovery during our fossil dig. So those are multiple views of a single piece. And Sherry, who's now doing her PhD on the bivalve mollusks from Lightning Ridge at University of New England, at that time was having her first visit to Lightning Ridge as one of our fossil dig members. And Ali Calvi, who does a lot of work at Winton now, was one of our dig team members too. And Sherry and Ali were visiting one of the local tourist attractions, which had a tray of rough opal material that you could go through and pick anything out you liked and pay 50 cents or $2 or whatever it might have been. And they recognized this piece as being something special and they paid their 50 cents or $2 and took it back to the dig. And Phil Bell, who was one of the dig team members that year, was able to recognize immediately that this was a piece of bony skin armor or a scoot from an ankylosaur. So this is the first opalized Ankylosaur scoop published in the world. That's Cunborosaurus from Queensland, just to show you how those bony plates sort of sit on the animal. So yeah, just one little piece puts the ankylosaurs here, and it was a discovery made by keen-eyed dig participants. So we're really grateful to them. The next one is baby dinosaurs. I know there's some really exquisite tiny dinosaur material from Victoria as well. This was also discovered by one of the participants on our dig, one of these two pieces. One of them was in the collection already, and the other, so the one at the top, multiple views of a single piece, was in the collection donated by a donor of a collection of fossils. The one at the bottom was a tiny little piece found by a woman named Helen from South Australia, who was one of our dig participants. And she set it aside and she didn't realize what she had. And when Phil Bell saw it, he said, you have a piece of tiny baby dinosaur there. So this was written up by Justin Kitchener, who was a student at the University of New England at the time. And it's some of the first evidence of pre-hatchling baby dinosaurs in Australia. So with work on material from here and from Victoria, Justin was able to establish that that tiny little bone was from a dinosaur that had not even hatched from its egg when it died. And that's significant because it's telling us that dinosaurs were breeding at Lightning Ridge, which also tells us things about dinosaur communities and the world they were living in. Lightning Ridge was a lot closer to the South Pole at that time. Was it cold? Was it warm? How did animals cope with long winter nights? Well, one thing we know, thanks to that one tiny little shard of bone, is that they were breeding here. A few words just about sauropod dinosaurs. Sauropods are also found at Lightning Ridge, and for the longest time, we've only had teeth. So those are 5 opalized sauropod teeth from Lightning Ridge. Tim Frauenfelder from the University of New England did his honours research and then PhD research on sauropod teeth initially and then dinosaur teeth generally. And Tim was able to tell from the basic morphology of the teeth and from microwear on the teeth that we had at least three sort of morphotypes or overall shapes of sauropod teeth, and that some of the sauropods were eating from high in the canopy, and some of them were eating from low on the ground, based on pits and scratches on the tooth surfaces. Um, we do have a more recent discovery of sauropod bone material, and that's an active research project now that is super top secret because it involves active opal miners and some of the complexities that come with finding opalized fossils in opal mines. But yeah, lovely illustration. And just to say that we had the sauropods here, we haven't named a species yet, but we had at least three species, we believe.
So stay tuned, and hopefully one day we'll have the paper, and you'll
Oh,
hear about it all over the news. It's very exciting. I've been able to, yeah, see some of the fossils coming out. It's very cool.
it's very cool. Yeah.
So we've actually done really well on time, Jenny. So we do have some time. If anyone has any questions, please do pop them in the chat, and we will be able to answer them. But in the meantime, I certainly have some questions for you. The first one I want to know is how is it that these opalized fossils actually form? So, Lightning Ridge is the only place on Earth where we actually find opalized fossils of vertebrates. There's one or two other places where we find some of the smaller bivalves and other things. But how does it form, and maybe why is it so rare?
Mm. So Lightning Ridge is the only dinosaur site in New South Wales other than White Cliffs. Now, White Cliffs is another opal field, and there are just one or two dinosaur fossils that have been found at White Cliffs because we assume that bits of carcasses have floated out to sea. White Cliffs was actually under the Eromanga Sea at the time that the opal-bearing deposits were laid down there. So White Cliffs and also opal fields in South Australia, like Andamuka and Cooper Pedy, don't generally produce dinosaur fossils, but they do produce plesiosaurs, ichthyosaurs, and other marine animals. The Queensland opal fields also produce fossils. They're less well known, but they do have rare theropod dinosaur teeth from the Queensland opal fields and plant fossil. There's also probable sauropod bone from the Winton area. So it's a really rich area of ongoing discovery. There was some really peculiar circumstances in Central Australia 100 million years ago or thereabouts that allowed opal producing sediments to form, and then incredibly specific geochemical conditions that allowed opal to form. So elsewhere in the world, there is precious opal. It's actually found in a number of countries. Australia is the main producer of opal in the world in terms of volume and quality, but there's opal produced in Ethiopia, Indonesia, the United States, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, Hungary, quite a lot of places. And most of those places, the opal is produced in rocks of volcanic origin. So one of the things that's going on is that our opal is forming in sedimentary rocks, which are more likely to preserve animal remains as fossils, compared with the sites and the generally younger sites overseas, where most of the opal is formed in volcanic rocks. There are interesting exceptions. So, for example, in Virgin Valley in Nevada, there are beautiful, beautiful opalized pieces of wood and pine cone casts from the bottom of a lake that had a volcanic flow into it. So there was vegetation material in the bottom of the lake that got incinerated, and voids were left in the volcanic rock that later filled up with opal. But yeah, there's snails in younger deposits preserved in opal in Indonesia, and there are little bits of plant fossil found in a few other areas. But the Australian opal fields are really extraordinary for and unique in the fact that they preserve opalized teeth and bones. That hasn't
Mm.
been found anywhere else in the world.
Mm.
And it's stupidly complex geomagnetic, geophysical, geochemical conditions that have allowed that to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from memory and thinking about fossilization generally, often you'll have an animal, a dinosaur who dies. Usually it gets buried quite quickly. So whether that's a flood or an avalanche or a sandstorm, and then over time, molecule by molecule, those bones or sometimes even the skin as well is replaced by minerals. So often that's a kind of rock. So when you dig it up, it's petrified, it's very hard. And so in this case, instead of a boring old rock, it's been replaced by, is it silica dioxide, is like the kind of actual name for opal. But yeah, it might be that it fossilized originally, got replaced by some kind of rock or sediment, and then the opalization happened later. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's two main ways that fossils are preserved as opal here. Opal starts as a fluid, so it starts as water with a high concentration of silica in it. Um, some of our fossils are really casts, if you like, so particularly soft-bodied animals like the mussel shells and the beautiful little snails. They tend to have been buried and for the animal to have decomposed and left a void. And it's that void that later fills up with silica-rich water that converts into opal. So it's much like jelly in a mold. But we also have more than people realize of specimens, generally of harder materials originally, like shell and bone and wood, where there has been a process whereby that has been preserved in really intricate detail, sometimes internally.
Mm,
And there's still discussion and still so much research to do to determine whether it has gone through intermediate fossilization stages where the organic material's been replaced by other minerals, which have then been replaced by opal. That's still not well understood.
yeah, okay.
Um, some good questions. Sally, do you want me to jump in and answer some questions?
Yeah, so starting with the first one from Ashley, what is the rarest opalized fossil that you found so far?
Mm. Well, many of the fossils are actually one-offs or unique, which is sometimes wonderful because it just makes them stunningly desirable and fascinating. But for scientific research, it's pretty handy to have
A
more
few
than
more would
one.
be nice, yeah.
Yeah. One of the truly extraordinary fossils in the Australian Opal Centre collection is an opalised shark tooth that was found in the late 1990s. It hasn't been published yet. It's under study at the moment by a student again at the University of New England at Armidale, Emil Herbert. It's one of my favorite rarest and best hero sort of fossils for a few reasons. One is that it is preserved in solid green crystal opal. The word crystal means that it's translucent, so light passes through it as well as bouncing off it. The miner who found it in the wall of the mine, so it is perfectly preserved. It hasn't been damaged by mining processes. And the sharks are so fascinating here because this was a largely freshwater and terrestrial environment, and sharks are marine animals. So there's a really interesting story there. There are some just so stories about why we have shark teeth, and then there's research happening at UNE at the moment. So it's one of my favorites. We have other things like mussel shells with bite marks in them. They're quite rare. They're not as sexy as some of the vertebrate animal fossils, but they're telling us things about interactions between animals. So I love that too. And then sometimes the really rare fossils are those that have a combination of attributes like spectacular opal color, beautiful preservation, gorgeous to look at, and also scientifically just drop dead amazing. So yeah, there's a few of them. There's a few. I can't talk about favorites too much. The shark tooth's an obvious one, but we could be here all night if I start thinking about it too much.
Okay, well, we'll move on to the next question, which is, have any pterosaur fossils been found at Lightning Ridge?
Yeah, really good question. And the answer is yes. So there are a number of pterosaur teeth. They're rare, but we have them. One has been published, and some others are under study. And there are a very small number of pterosaur bones. Pterosaur material is incredibly rare and precious because it's so fragile and so rarely preserved, as I'm sure Adele has spoken about if you've been
Yep.
speaking to Adele. Yeah. So there's some wonderful small fragments of pterosaur bone opalized that are in the Australian Museum collection, and we have some fragments here, including a couple of teeth. So yeah, probably there were a whole lot of pterosaur individuals and families that were fishing over the rivers, living in the forests, um, because of the nature of the fragility of the material and then the challenges with recovering things from the opal mines. We haven't seen as many as we hope to. And with some more um, planned and very carefully conducted fossil digs in mines, which may be possible over time, hopefully we'll find some more of that really fragile and precious material.
Yeah, because as Adele mentioned in a few of our other talks, that to be able to fly, these animals had these incredibly hollow bones. And for her, some of her specimens, like the bone thickness was a millimeter thick. So if you think that, maybe it's managed to avoid a jackhammer, maybe it's managed to not be broken up in the agitator, that kind of big rock tumbler. And then maybe it's out there in a pile of trailings somewhere where you just need to go and find it. So you need to go on these digs so you can be the next one.
It's terrific that we've got the micro CT scanning technology available now too.
Mm,
Um, some of the material, the opalized material that is fragile and thin and small, is really difficult to prep out, but is possible to detect through scanning. So there's a whole world of investigation of material that's possible through those digital imaging and scanning technologies that I just can't wait to see what comes out of more of that work.
yeah. Well, speaking of, I'm going to jump to Paul's question. He said that he recalls a couple of years ago, Paul Willis took some opalized dinosaur fossils from Lightning Ridge that he was planning to CT scan and describe. Did that end up happening?
Aha, yes, the briefcase dinosaur. The one that the question is about is known as the briefcase dinosaur because it walked in through the front door just to a meter to my right in a briefcase. Paul has done some CT scanning on that. He's now donated that material to the Australian Opal Centre. He delivered it by hand a few months ago, and I was so thrilled to sit down and Paul showed me through the animations of the scans that have been done to date. So we're not ready to publish that material yet. There's a lot of work still to be done. But yeah, the work got underway and there's really fascinating things emerging from that CT stuff. I'll be completely honest, when Paul wanted to scan that material, I thought, yeah, you can see where the bones are. Let's just prep it out. Some of the really nuanced information that is visible in those scans, halos around the bones in the surrounding rock. There's all sorts of potential chemical signals there that could tell us things about not just what we have, but how it's formed, some of the processes of formation of opal itself, as well as the opalized fossils. So, yeah, that's a watch this space one as well. It is almost certainly an ornithopod dinosaur, but we're not at a point yet of being able to try to say whether it is one of the named ornithopods, whether we even have diagnostic material, where there are characteristic things that we can connect to a particular
Mm.
named type of ornithopod. But yeah, it's an absolute ripper. Yeah, busting at the seams to work on that more.
Amazing. Okay, the next question is from Elliot, and they have asked, are the only theropod species discovered so far those megaraptorids like lightning claw, or are there other Cretaceous theropod families around?
So at Lightning Ridge, to the extent that we can say what types of theropods we have, um, they're all megaraptorid material or specimens. The teeth appear to be, there are a lot of isolated teeth, which are just stunning, but they appear to be megaraptorid teeth too. There is theropod material which is too incomplete and too damaged to be able to be quite sure whether they're megaraptorids or not. I mean, on megaraptorid teeth, something people often don't realize, I only realized for the first time quite recently, is that the first dinosaur tooth ever found in Australia is an opalized dinosaur tooth from Lightning Ridge, found in the first decade of the 20th century and sold to the British Museum of Natural History in a parcel of opalized fossils within under 10 years of opal mining starting here. And it sat over there in the British Museum of Natural History, unpublished until only just a very small number of years ago. And Jake Katevsky and Steve Poropat published it. So yeah, they're fantastic. It's not, you can't actually say what species it is, but it's so historically significant. And it also talks to the incredibly attentive opal miners who are noticing these things as they're going along. Their livelihood depends on them being incredibly observant, and filled with wonder and awe by what they're finding. And that's been the case right since the very beginning.
I think as well something I want to very briefly bring up is the cultural gifts program. I know that that's been a pretty huge thing to help some of these miners. Essentially, is it getting a tax write-off? So if they do find a specimen that is a dinosaur bone or a fossil that is significant, they can donate it to the Australian Opal Centre or another sort of cultural institution, and they can get a little something back for it.
Yeah, that's right. It's a great scheme that was developed, I think, in the 1980s to encourage Australians to donate culturally significant material, so artworks, war material, war relics, different things. Fossils are included, important gemstones are included, all sorts of things. Opalized fossils were recognised fairly early on as unique parts of Australia's movable cultural heritage. And opal miners struggle to make a living at all. And when they find something that has dollar value attached to it, like a rare and precious opalized fossil, it's very hard for them to just hand it over. It could be the only thing that is going to get them a return on their investment of money and time in their work. So, yes, the Cultural Gifts Program has been absolutely critical to the Australian Opal Centre building its collection. Um, Many opal miners actually don't earn enough to be able to benefit from a tax deduction. So it's an ongoing, incredible community effort to build this collection. But yes, we've had several dozen donations through that scheme, and the way it works essentially is that independent valuers um, agree on a value, or two independent valuers will place a value on a collection or an item that's donated, and the average of those values is taken as the value of the material, and then the donor can claim that as a deduction from their taxable income. So it's a scheme that many of the museums and galleries around Australia benefit from greatly, and that rewards the donors to an extent. It doesn't put cash in their pocket, but it helps reduce their taxable income a little. So we are incredibly grateful to the Cultural Gifts Program, because the value of some of the opalized fossils is such that without that incentive and that reward, it just wouldn't be financially possible for people
Mm.
to hand things over.
Amazing. And speaking of how people can support the Australian Opal Centre, someone has asked that they saw a reference to the 1,000 by 1,000 campaign. they'd love to be able to support. So what is that campaign and how else can people support the AOC?
That's fantastic. Whoever that is, I want them to come and work for me. Yeah, look, we're building a major new museum here at Lightning Ridge. It's an extraordinary endeavour as well. So we're looking to put Australian opal and our rare opalised fossils onto the pedestal that they should have been put onto many decades ago. Oh, thanks for bringing that up, Sally. That's a an artist's impression or a rendering, an architectural rendering of the future centre. It's an amazing building. It's half recessed into the ground and construction's underway at the moment. That's a drone view taken in January this year. And it's showing the sort of superstructure of the building. Um, it's a little hard to tell, but what's happening is that the building is being buried halfway into the ground so that it's connected to the earth and it helps keep it cool. Um, we are fundraising still for fit out and construction of the building, and people can contribute by going to the Australian Opal Centre website. The 1,000 by 1,000 campaign that somebody has asked about is looking for a total of 1,000 people to each contribute $1,000. You can actually make a single $1,000 donation or make monthly contributions. And that is building on work done by people we call our AOC founders, who collectively, this is such an amazing, wonderful thing. Community members here at Lightning Ridge and across Australia have each contributed, starting at $10,000 each, to seed the fundraising for this project. And from that, we raised commitments of $1 million. From that $1 million commitment, our local government promised $2 million. And with that $3 million, we were able to get significant contributions from the New South Wales and Commonwealth governments. So that's what's enabled us to get this as far as it is. And it's coming along beautifully. So this is going to be the new home for Australian opal and opalised fossils, and it will become a world centre for opal-related knowledge and training. So it's really going to put Outback Australia on the map globally, in the gemstone world in particular, but a wonderful place to house these incredible fossils. Great question, thank you.
I think another way that not only can you support the Australian Opal Centre, but if you've ever wanted to go on a bit of a fossil dig, you might not get underground into the mines, but you can absolutely be one of these people who finds one of these incredible fossils. The Australian Opal Centre runs digs each and every year. I think at the moment you're still looking for a few people to go on the August dig. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So the dig runs every August, in the second part of August. It's pretty gorgeous. We now run 2 weeks. The first week is intended for people that are first-time dig participants. So it includes a terrific series of lectures and a lot of hands-on training in how to identify the opalized fossils. The second week is for return participants only. So we build on the skills that people have developed. We've got people coming back for their 8th and 9th times this year. So we've got real dig groupies who over their years with us have just made incredible contributions to our collection, and who are developing skills in the areas that they have an interest in. So we showed that photo earlier of people sitting at tables sorting through tailings. Some people can do that. I'm one of them who can do that for weeks. It's incredibly meditative and really satisfying. Other people can do that for a few days, their first dig, and then they just say, nah, that's not for me. So we've got other work, and it varies from year to year. Some years we do GPS mapping of sites. Some years we do more prep work. It's quite variable, but yes, I think we still have 5 spots available in August. It's terrific. We have people from university student aged people, so minimum age is 18. So it's because we're in the opal fields and doing potentially risky work. It's not a dig for kids. So minimum age of 18. I think the oldest person we've had is 87 so far. Yeah, so it's my favorite fortnight of the year. I get to actually get away from a screen and get my hands and eyes into the opal dirt and into fossils, and just spending 2 weeks or a few days with like-minded people is just really great. Friendships formed and fossils found.
Yeah, absolutely. The AOC dig, I think I first did it in 2021. During my Masters of Research, it was the first sort of dinosaur or fossil dig I'd been able to go on, and it was the best. I loved it so much. The people were gorgeous. And even just getting to experience Lightning Ridge, I think there's often an afternoon where you can go to the artesian baths. You can go and do the car door tours. And there's so many quirky little kind of touristy sites you can go and see. It is well worth the trip up there. It's absolutely incredible. Now, Adele, who is watching, thank you, has reminded me that another way people can support the AOC is by becoming a life member. Jenny, can you chat about that?
Absolutely. So we have a membership program. At the moment, we've got a few hundred members. I'm not quite sure how many right now. Our members are powerful and important to us because they show our government supporters that there is a real groundswell of desire and support for the work that we're doing. We are completely self-funded in terms of our operations. We've had wonderful government support for constructing the new facility, but all of our operations are self-funded. So our members are important to us also for the income. And we do have a life membership program. It costs $1,100 to be a life member, which gets you life entry into this new facility. And yeah, our life members are invaluable to us. We have about 147 life members at the moment, I think. So over the years that we've been developing and growing the Australian Opal Centre from a dream to a very substantial reality, our life members have been absolutely bedrock to us financially. And when I look at, I've got a poster of the faces of our life members, and we're on to our second lot of 100 now. And when I look at those faces, it's what keeps me going. Those people are extraordinary people, generous people, and people who have come together to do in a communal way a really extraordinary thing. So yeah, thanks, Adele. You can definitely be a life member or an ordinary member.
Either one.
Hmm.
Now, that was pretty much all of the questions that we had submitted. So, if you do want to know more about anything that the Australian Opal Centre does, or you want to go on your very first or your eighth fossil dig, you can follow this link to their website. Just type in Australian Opal Centre on Google or use this QR code, and you can check out what they do and you can donate there as well. If you do want to see some of the updates that are going on, the Australian Opal Centre is also on Facebook and Instagram, so please give them a follow. Yeah, they do amazing work, and you'll definitely have to stay tuned for some of the amazing research that's going to be coming out over the next few years from the finds from these fossil digs as well. So there's going to be a lot still coming out of this amazing location.
Absolutely. And tonight we're focused on dinosaurs. My passion is mammals. There's some amazing, amazing mammal discoveries here from the opal mines too, and the invertebrates, the fish, the turtles, the pterosaurs, the sheer diversity of the fauna and flora here is just something else. So yeah, if anyone's interested, please do come and visit us. Our website is fairly slim at the moment. We're going to occupy that with more and more information over time, but we also run a fossil identification service for people, and we have incredible donations of opalized fossil material coming in from all over the world now. People who are hearing about the significance of this material who've acquired it incidentally through inheritance or through buying rough opal and finding a fossil in it. So if you've got something that you think you'd like us to look at, It can be hard to identify things from photographs, but we do our best. And if you come to Lightning Ridge, you can always make an appointment to see one of us, one of the paleontologists as well. We really, really enjoy fossil people and opal people, and fossils and opals.
All of the above.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for joining us. This was actually our last online talk for the Australian Heritage Festival. If you are Sydney based, we have one more event tomorrow, which is happening at Macquarie University in their History Museum, where I'll be chatting with bioarchaeologist Ronica Power, all about the differences and similarities between paleontology and archaeology. So we'll basically be talking about how often people get us confused between Indiana Jones and Jurassic Park, but it should be a very fun event. Again, if you had someone who was dinosaur mad and they didn't quite get to make this presentation, it is being recorded. It will be uploaded either tonight or tomorrow on the Found a Fossil YouTube channel, and I'm sure Jenni can share it to the Australian Opal Centre pages as well. But that is pretty much all from us. So again, thank you for coming, and hopefully we will see you either in Lightning Ridge or at our next event. Thank you so much for coming, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.